So I'm going to talk a little bit about working with commercial patterns. These are the patterns that you would buy usually in a fabric store. The big four, Butterwick, McCall, Simplicity, and Vogue, I believe are all now owned by the same company. There's also Quick Sew, which is usually a little bit cheaper. If you don't get these on sale, they can be $15 to $20, so I would definitely recommend trying to get them on sale. I know it seems like a lot, and I always used to complain about them, but I went through there was a speaker at this conference that I was at who worked for Simplicity, and she talked about the time and energy and how many people it goes into actually making a pattern. So then I try not to complain too much, but you still won't catch me really buying them on sale. I mean, at full price. So I have a lot of these. I've actually moved away from using a lot of these, and now I use mostly independent patterns that are PDFs that you print out. So a couple things. First is you want to definitely figure out what view you want to make. So on the front of a pattern, there's usually different views which have different details. So this one, for example, is a little more flowy in the front. This one has ruffles down the front. This one is flowy but looks a little longer. And this one's not as flowy and is shorter. So you would decide which one of those that it is that you would want to make. The other thing that you want to consider is what the back view looks like. So these are actually the front views, and then these are the back. So just look at things. Anytime you see a line or like these lines here represent darts. Sometimes you'll see lines for zippers. These lines here are basically trying to show you that the fabric is flowy. So figure out which view that you want to make. The other thing you have to do is figure out which size you are. Now, this is the part that people get a little crazy about, and that's they get worried about the number. But to be honest, when you're making your own clothing, no one ever knows the number because it doesn't have a tag in it. So it's important for you to make the size that you are according to the measurements on the pattern, not the size you buy in the store. They're very different. So if I wore a size 8 jeans, I'd be like a 14 in a sewing pattern. Clothing stores have no universal sizing. It's pretty much each company does their own sizing, and there's something called vanity sizing. So some companies, to make you feel good, will make their size a little bit on the bigger side. So you are actually think you're wearing a smaller size, but really it's just the number. So don't panic about the number. People don't, nobody will know when you're doing. So you have to usually, depending on what you're making, if I was making a shirt, I would go based upon my bust and my waist measurement. If it was a tunic, I would put my hip measurement in there. If it's pants, you need your waist and your hips. If it was a dress, you need your bust, your waist, and your hips. Shirts, sometimes also the back waist length, which is basically from the bone that sticks out at the bottom of your neck down to where your actual waist is. Another thing, I'll do a whole nother lesson on taking body measurements, because if you don't really know how to take your body measurements, it's not going to be correct. So make sure you're taking it at your natural waist, not the waist where you're actually going to wear it. You have to make adjustments for that. So you figure out what size you are based upon the little flap that's on there. Most pattern companies do have universal sizes. So if you're a size with one, you're probably a size with another. Companies put something called ease into it, because you have to be able to move into your clothing, so it's a little bit of wiggle room. And then there's basically the I forget what it's called, silhouette ease, or an ease for what it actually looks like. So if it's supposed to be a big baggy shirt, they're going to add extra ease into that. So once you figure out what size you are and what view you are, can you see that clear?
That's a bit blurry. Okay.
So what you do is you find your size along the top, and then you go down to the view you're making. Now you will see that each size and view has 2 numbers. And that's because some fabric comes in shorter widths, like 45. Other fabrics come in wider widths, which is 60. So if your fabric's wider, you don't tend to need as much. So you can, when I would teach this in school with my students, I would tell them to circle both numbers. So if I was making a 14 And if you see, I would circle both of those because you really don't know the width of your fabric until you go to the fabric store. So that's how you figure out how much fabric you need, and this is in yards. And that's something to really consider. Rompers are great, but they do take a ton of fabric, so just think about that kind of stuff. The other thing is if there's a direction to the fabric, you want to usually get more if you do plaits. So another thing on here, it tells you what kind of fabrics that you need to make this. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to pick any of the fabrics that are on here. It's just that if you pick a different fabric, it may not fit or look like the pattern envelope. So in this case, cotton blends, crepe, challis, crepe de chine, any of those would work. If I use something else, so I had to use this, I feel like it was a faux suede or something with this pattern, it was fine. Then there is a place for notions. Anything else that you need for this pattern doesn't actually have it. Another one might. If you need interfacing at all, that's usually a separate. And then sometimes patterns require 2 different fabrics, so it would tell you which fabric. And then the last part is the finished garment measurements. That's how much it's going to be when it is finished. So if a size 14 has a bust measurement of 36, when this shirt is done, the bust measurement is going to be 45.5. So that's going to tell me that there's almost 10 extra inches in the bust. So this is a pretty roomy pattern. About 3 inches is typical for just regular ease, and then the flowiness adds some to that. And then you can usually check the width at the lower edge and so on. Sometimes patterns are meant for stretchy fabrics and knits. So something that wasn't on that envelope, which is going to be on an envelope for knits, is going to be this arrow and box at the top. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that your fabric is stretched enough to make the pattern. If it's not, then you're going to end up having something that's too small. So what you do is take a 4-inch piece of fabric, or if I was had something off the bolt. So for example, I'll just take this shirt. So you could, if you're in the fabric store, what you do is you hold at one end, and without stretching it, hold at that 4-inch mark, and then see if you can pull it all the way to the end. If it doesn't stretch from there to there, that's not a suitable fabric for this pattern. So that's something that's different. Here, this pattern envelope has notions. So notions are everything except fabric that you need. That's where you'll find thread, zippers, twill tape, elastic, snaps, anything like that. So that would be in that part. So that's basically the outside of the envelope. You do want to make sure that sometimes, so for example, this shows the girl wearing shorts, but you have to pay attention because the shorts aren't included in this pattern. So it depends. So the next thing, once you buy your pattern, is you open it up and it has instruction sheets. So the instruction sheets are pretty much, again, the same. Vogue and Burda are a little bit different because they are European patterns. These Simplicity, McCall's, and Butterwick are almost always about the same. So you'll have what looks like the front view again. Then you'll have something that looks like pattern pieces. So this shows you all the pattern pieces that are in this pattern. If you are a beginner, don't pick something that has 30 pattern pieces because that means you got to sew 30 together and it's going to be kind of a lot. Some patterns have different views don't require all the pattern pieces. So if you're doing view A and you saw different letters here, that would mean you only have the ones that have letter A or have no letter. Then down here, it tells you these are your cutting layouts. So these companies have spent a ton of time and they have programs on their computers to plan out how to put the pattern piece on the fabric to waste the least amount and to get it to fit. So you have to pay attention to what view are you doing, okay? And then also, do you have 45 or 60-inch fabric? That could change. And what size are you? So you pay attention to those. Then there's usually a little glossary up at the top that gives you a couple different directions. And then the directions start. So you follow through, and if there's more than one view, you skip all the sections that don't apply to you. And then at the end, a lot of the directions are put in Spanish and French. So if that was your native language, you could look at those as well. So that is the instruction paper. And again, I could do another lesson on that later. Okay, and then the last thing that's going to come in the envelope are tissue paper. Now, don't open this until you're ready because it's very hard to get it back in the envelope. You can see this is the one that I used. I made a couple joggers out of these, and so they don't fold up super nice. So you just need to make sure, keep them folded until you need them. And this is a multi-size pattern, so there's multiple lines, and you just have to make sure you always cut on the correct line. So that's the basics of using a commercial pattern. If you have any specific questions, I would be more than happy to help you. And next week, I'll definitely do a lesson on taking body measurements because that's super important. And then I could also do a lesson on PDF patterns as well. So have a good day, and I will see you all later. How do I stop it? Oh.